You are listening to the F11 Photography Podcast.
To the chasers of light, to the purveyors of pictures, to all of you listening, this is the F11 Photography Podcast. I am your host, Kevin Deal, along with your other host, Brandon Gorrie.
Oh yeah, baby. We're out here. I've got a nice pepperoni kolache, fresh cup of coffee. Let's record some stuff.
Yeah, the pepperoni kolache. So there is a place really close to our studio that we eat at that makes awesome kolaches. And if you've ever been to Texas, people here are like, oh, you got to go to this place or that place for good kolaches. And a lot of times the recommendations fall short of expectations. I will say that this place lives up to the hype. They also brew their own beer. So if you could have kolaches, coffee, and beer, what more would you need in life? We have been on break, so we record these episodes in clusters, and then we mix and mingle when we reconvene. And so this is our first first episode in this cluster. So we've been away, and we're now just sitting down and mixing and mingling. And
wow, that is so good.
Yeah, he loves those. He loves those kolaches. So I don't know what you've been up to lately, other than shooting. I've been in a YouTube rabbit hole lately. You know, they say, if you're a drug dealer, don't get high on your own product. And as somebody with a YouTube channel, I have fallen into the trap of watching other people's YouTube channels. And my latest obsession on YouTube is that I like to watch videos of like professional composers, musical composers reacting to music that I've listened to for years and years and years that I've loved. And for those of you who may be new to this podcast, I am a musician. I've done a lot of DJing, composition, done film scores, scores for video games, things like that. And so I have a musical background. I've played in bands and all that. And so I enjoy music at that level. And then, of course, there's the pure listener who is just somebody who really appreciates music but may not be a musician. And so it's just really cool seeing these composers who are way more advanced than I ever was as a musician, just like kind of validate your feelings about your favorite bands and your favorite songs, and maybe even like uncover some nuggets that you didn't even notice because you've listened to the song 1,000 times and just haven't noticed it. And on this person's first listen because they know what to listen for. I can see things, hear things that you don't. But that's been that's what I've been up to lately. It's been driving my wife crazy because I'll like listen to 3 or 4 different composers' reactions to the same song. So I'll spend like 3 hours watching videos about the same song. And she's like, what are you doing? Like, I'm just, being bored. So. Well,
what I've been doing, that's awesome, Kevin. You know, I'm really happy for you. I'm glad you're finding your way through the musical space in new light. You know, that's great. Kevin's over here chuckling. I'm soon to buy a professional archive level printer with 16 colors. Really looking forward to it. It's going to be a big investment. So I've been binging YouTube videos on color correcting and prepping large files for print. And that is a really cool rabbit hole. I mean, the CYAN or whatever the hell, or the CMYK.
CMYK, yeah. Cyan, magenta, yellow. Yes.
Yeah, that's a nightmare, dude. But can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, I remember I had to learn all that in school when we did photography classes. They'd be like, okay, you got to take your file and convert it to CMYK. And, from what getting your own printer is awesome. I'm more of the opinion, unless you print all the time, then you're going to make art galleries. But I just, find a print house that'll do things for you and you build a relationship with. So,
well, I will say this, not a lot of people know about this, but I did shoot an entire budgeted 14-man crew curated photo shoot while I was in Kiev in 2021. And we rented out we rented out an entire floor of the Kiev School of Film, the Bud v Kino, if anyone knows it. It's over 100 years old. It's where a lot of the greats went. I think Alexander Dovzhenko taught there, and he was big in early Soviet cinema. So I have an entire shoot that I did there with a gaffer, a couple stylists, actors. We paid for a van to get all this lighting equipment and everything, and only 4 or 5 people have seen it. It hasn't even made the light of day. So I'm trying to finally debut this very near and dear shoot to me at a gallery in Austin.
And that was at the Kiev School of Film, and we actually broadcast from the Austin School of Film here in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, so damn right.
Yeah. Running joke on this podcast, I think this is our 13th episode we've recorded. A running joke on this podcast is that we don't have sponsors, and everything must come to an end, and now we are sponsored. So, Luminar Neo is an easy-to-use software that comes in both standalone and plug-in versions. It's an editor. It's powered by AI. AI is all the rage, but this is not a bunch of hype. There's actually some really cool AI in there. I'll tell you briefly about it. It comes with really cool things like Accent AI, Structure AI, and Sky AI if you're doing sky replacement. It has some really cool modules that I've already been taking advantage of, like Relight if you're a natural light photographer and you have situations where you want to preserve your highlights in the background and then your subject is a little too dark and you didn't bring your flash with you because you're a natural light photographer, which is a roundabout way of saying you don't know how to use flash, by the way. But let's say you're doing a natural light shoot. You can use this really cool AI feature called Relight, and it will make your foreground a little brighter, light up your subject a little more, and then preserve your background. So that's pretty cool. They have power line removal, dust spot AI, mask AI. They have layers. They have portrait background removal, and then they have extensions like HDR merge, noise AI, super sharp AI, upscale AI, background removal, and focus stacking. So I just wanted to let you all know about that. It's really cool software. I'm super stubborn. I'm a Capture One Photoshop user, and when they approached me about doing sponsorship, I was like, well, let's see. And sure enough, a lot of the modules and AI that they have, first and foremost, integrate as a plugin in Photoshop, so I don't even have to use the standalone version if I don't want to, but you could if you want to catalog things and all that. And I find that a lot of their AI modules do things faster for me than I can do them for myself in Photoshop, where I have to take several steps. I can just go, hey, I want to make the eyes bigger, or I want to change their color or whatever, or I want to just do a really quick skin retouch, nothing that's like beauty or anything, but pretty quick skin retouch. It'll get that done super fast for you. We're going to leave a link in the description below where you can get 10% off. Use our code. And check that out. But on today's episode, the theme is going to be the future of photography. What do you see camera companies doing moving forward? Innovations you'd like to see to move the photography industry forward? Innovations that might put some of you out of work? That's what we're going to be talking about in today's episode. And since our sponsor creates AI software, I think we're going to start today's episode with artificial intelligence. AI is the rage. I went to WPPI in Las Vegas last month, and literally any software company had AI and something on their software. That is where things are going. AI can be a great thing, a powerful tool if done right. No, I did not see the Elon Musk fears when I was there at WPPI. There were no Terminator Rise of the Machines with the little Predator lasers pointed at my forehead. The editing software, it's still there to retouch skin and take power lines out and all that. If that changes, I'll let you know. But so far, the AI is just doing very peaceful things and making my life a lot easier. That being said, AI could put some people out of business, particularly editors, because at WPPI, and we talked about this in a previous episode, there was the Imagine booth. And Imagine was this software that basically analyzes all your edits. Not like, oh, you use this preset all the time, so we'll apply this preset. But it's like, no, we noticed that you like to bump the contrast up in situations where you're shooting into the sun because you lose contrast when you're shooting in the sun. So we noticed you've been doing that. So we're going to do it for you. We noticed you like to use masks. We noticed that you like to, anytime a backlit subject needs to be lightened up because they basically look like a shadow, we noticed that you lift the shadows there, you draw a mask in. We're going to do it for you. We noticed that you like to crop at 5x4 because you're probably an Instagram photographer, or 1x1. We'll do that for you. And so this is all built in. to software, and I watched someone send this to the AI and it edited a wedding in less than 5 minutes. Now, if you've ever shot a wedding, you know that you're not taking 5 or 10 pictures. You're probably taking at least 1,000, if not like 2,500 shots throughout the course of an 8-hour day when you shoot a wedding. And it just takes the data. I don't know what the Lightroom calls it. I don't think it's the EXIF data. I think they have some other name for it, but it takes it and it analyzes all your edits. You're not uploading the files to the server online. You're uploading all of your information about your edits. And so it knows, when I have this much light and color of this kind inputting in, I will analyze it. And I know that the way you react when a picture looks like this is you do this or that or whatever. And so when you think about all the dynamic changes that happen when you're taking pictures. Let's say you're doing an outdoor wedding, you shoot into the sun, you shoot away from the sun, you go inside, you go outside, your white balance shifts, your color shifts, your contrast shifts. So you can't just apply a preset to it and then have that like make your wedding day look amazing. And I'm just using weddings as an example because it's one of the industries that's most affected by this, but this actually spans across all different genres of photography. And so using AI is going to be a very powerful thing because if you can have AI edit a wedding in 5 or 10 minutes, and then you just spend a half a day going through making sure it did its work, and then you find, it's 98% there, I just have to do a 2% edit to like a few shots, you can turn a wedding around in a few days. And typically, a busy wedding photographer shoots on average 40 weddings a year. And so they're 8 weeks out on edits. And if you can turn something around in a few days, there's actually a video of a guy who turned around a wedding in 52 minutes and legit looking shots. So point being, maybe if you're an editor, maybe the editing, maybe editing jobs, some editing jobs are at risk, but I don't think that you can't hire a machine to go shoot a wedding. So
it sounds like you kind of can at this point.
Well, the machine doesn't know what moments to capture and all that, and it can't move around. It's got to be a robot, right? You can't just show up with a camera with a robot. Now, the post editing, I still think we're there with the post production. AI is here. Like it's not about to arrive. It's here. There are programs where you can create your own pictures from scratch, which we'll get into some really some industries I see. For instance, like product photography, new companies. If you can construct a human being from scratch with AI and put your product in front of it and make it look realistic, I see small and up and coming companies that don't have really large budgets for huge campaigns. I see them like if there's some service kind of an in-between guy who's like, look, for $2,000, I can create with your product a full book of images with artificial human beings. You don't have to hire models. You don't have to hire photographers and all that. I do see AI working into that portion of our industry. Weddings, a lot of modeling stuff. Like if a model wants to build their portfolio, they need to work with a human being to do that. So I think that it will penetrate into certain areas and then other areas are safe for the foreseeable future until at least hopefully we're like long and gone. But I'd love to hear your thoughts because I know you use AI.
I really do love AI. I recently purchased a full subscription for Midjourney, and it didn't take me long to sort of figure out the prompts, to figure out the seeds and like the things necessary and how different descriptors are weighted in the prompt. And for those of you that don't know what Midjourney is, basically it's a Discord server service where you type in a prompt and you describe a scene as narratively and as detailed as possible. And you divide the narrative by commas, you divide it by semicolons, and there's different weights on that as well. You can change the rendering style. If you want it to look like Studio Ghibli, you can do that. If you want it to look like a Dali painting, you can do that. I generally try to stay within photorealistic, and there's different inputs and commands you can put in to change it to look like realistic photos. So that being said, there's a lot of ways that you can tweak an image and continue to build upon this idea where you change small details and you make it super replicable until finally you've got your background engineered. You've got the subject engineered. You've got the look engineered. One thing is if I want to create a brutalist image that's very void of life, I can combine, the words brutalism, Eastern Europe, And Elliot Emil, who's a top-of-the-line fashion designer who's very, very dark and very minimal, edgy, moody, that sort of thing. And it takes it in a direction that I like it. Now, from those three general broad terms, I could really isolate things and start working on objects. I can start working on colors of hair. I can start working on complexion. I can start working on scene, cinema. I can even input, it's insane. I can even input specific cameras and lenses that it would be using at different f-stops. So you do have that subject background separation that you want. And, you can input the different specific types of lighting that you want. Most people in the photography area of Midjourney stay with cinematic lighting or cinematic grades. And when you type in cinematic grade, it actually starts harmonizing the two major colors in your photo. So like if you have teals in the shadows, it'll be more towards orange in the highlights and the mids. And the same goes for pinks and greens. And so it balances the shots as well. And also it takes a compositionally balanced shot for you also. So if you were going to type in any sort of architectural shot or any sort of subject versus background shot or environment, it knows the rule of thirds, it knows distortion, it knows spatial composition, which is absolutely insane. It takes a lot of photographers years to develop that eye. As well as that, I've started building these sort of editorial slash fashion style inspired images on Midjourney, and it's absolutely insane what you can create. And I'm starting to get to the point where I can create a multiple series with more or less the same model, same hairstyle, same clothing and everything. And you can create almost an entire lookbook. And so, we're coming really close to a specific fashion brand. We're coming exceedingly close to being able to recreate a fashion item shoot by creating the model and the pose and everything like that. And then you can even create the purse on Midjourney and on a white background. And then you can just go into Photoshop, manipulate it with a liquify tool. It wouldn't take that long, and then you select it and you can just drag and drop into the thing. You can drag their logo, their label, put it on the bag. And it's so similar to product photography because a lot of product photography uses vectors now. They go in and the details, they actually just draw the shape of the shadows and the lights and the highlights, and then they just color over them the appropriate color to make sure that it is 100% refined. So I know there was one photographer in Germany named Sebastian Kortmann, and he's a cinematographer, and he's also been using AI, and he actually developed a full editorial series for a purse company in Germany, I believe. And the whole story is it's yellow, orange, it's a cine still film style grade and style shot, which he got AI to produce, which is insane. And it's of this woman with a high fashion purse and immaculate model in an orange trench coat stepping off the subway from multiple angles, and it maintained the same model, the same hairstyle, and the same color style all the way through, and the images were absolutely perfect.
So what you're saying is we should get Midjourney to sponsor our podcast because
Yes.
you're an endorser.
Yeah, well, here's the crazy thing is I don't know what the workaround is this yet, but you can't copyright anything you make from Midjourney quite yet.
Well, I think it would be an effective tool for mood boarding. If you're in a creative rut, it sounds like it would be cool. It's like, do a little bit of thinking for me. Oh yeah, that's kind of the vibe I was going for. You filled in some of the voids for me. Now I can picture a model. I can picture a stylist. I can picture a makeup artist I want to use for this. So I do think that there are some effective tools that it gives you.
It's funny you mentioned the mood boarding because I pitched to a brand called Elwood, and they've got they just released a catalog, a camo catalog, and they're a minimalist brand out of LA. And so I pitched to them with this mood board generated by AI of having dead leaves and branches in front of a white backdrop, super minimalist, and it came out insanely well.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. Yeah. See that. So how much is Midjourney? Just out of curiosity.
It's $30 a month.
Hey, $30 a month is what a lot of us pay for websites and things like that. But I would gladly pay $30 a month to, have some thoughts generated that could maybe make me some money. So pretty cool stuff. Yeah. Artificial intelligence is gonna, like I said, it's gonna be here to stay. I do think that there are some areas, like especially with editing, it could take over some people's jobs. I don't think with retouching we're quite there yet. Skin is not algorithmic, and data and it's all ones and zeros, artificial intelligence, like trying to organically recreate skin to look unique is still, we're not there yet. And it may be several years before we are there yet.
You are listening to the F11 Photography Podcast.
Artificial intelligence is definitely the future. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about today. I think the next subject I want to bring up, so, and you chime in if there's anything you see in the future, you tell me, but there's obvious things that are happening in the future, like DSLRs are dead. Mirrorless is the future. That's where we're at. And we want mirrorless to be the future because the flange distances and everything on these cameras allow manufacturers to make smaller lenses. And in the case of some Canon lenses, they said, well, we'll make them bigger, but we'll give you a whole nother stop of light you weren't able to get before, something like a 28 to 70 f2. And Canon holds a patent for a 70 to 135 f2, which is very intriguing, being able to shoot at f2 throughout that range. Apparently, they also have a patent for a 24 to 105 2.8. We've all heard of 24 to 105 f4s, but you always have to get the 24 to 70 f2.8. So if they're able to come out with a 24 to 105 2.8, that is all thanks to mirrorless. And so mirrors are dead, DSLRs are dead. That's definitely something that I see happening with the future of photography. The next major innovation I see is the global shutter. Are you familiar with the global shutter?
Not so much.
Okay, so for those of you listening and you don't know what the hell a global shutter is, you may see some phenomenon, and I know Brandon knows what I'm talking about here because he does videography. So when you shoot on a mirrorless camera and you're shooting on like a wide lens and you jerk the camera right to left, you'll start seeing some weird shifting going on. That's called shutter roll. And shutter roll happens because, so the way your shutter reads data, it reads it from top to bottom. Okay, and so when you take a picture, it's not like when you shoot on film, and the film just sees all this light hit it at the same time, and boom, it like burns it into the emulsion, and then the shutter closes, and that's your shot. That's not how it works with digital. With digital, you have your sensor, and everything reads from top to bottom, and that's why some of you, when you're using electronic shutter and you're like, why do I have these these bands across my frame? It's because those are the blades of the shutter getting in the way of the flash, and they're not in synchronization, and you're having issues. And that is a direct result of the current state of the shutters that we use. And the way that they read out. The global shutter is something that's evaded these camera manufacturers for years. I honestly don't care who comes up with it first. I'm all into capitalism. If Nikon comes out with it first, great. If Sony, Canon, whoever, please come out with the global shutter, because the global shutter functions just like film. It's just like it flashes, it reads everything across the sensor all at once, and then it closes. And so that's where we're heading. That's something I want to see happen. And another example of that, some of you who shoot an electronic shutter, if you see someone kicking a soccer ball, when you shoot a mechanical shutter and you shoot at like 1,000th of a second and you have a soccer ball, the soccer ball looks like a soccer ball. But an electronic shutter, that soccer ball will turn into an oval because you'll have that weird warping, that shutter warp, the rolling shutter. And so global shutter is hopefully what we'll see, and I think that'll be the future of photography. I think it'll be at least a half a decade before you start seeing it on like $1,500, $2,000 cameras. I think this is going to be a $5,000 and up type of feature for the time being, until the Canon, Sony, and all them decide, yeah, we'll let the peasants have the global shutter. It'll come eventually, but that's something that I see in the future happening for sure. I have a wish list I want to talk about, but do you have anything you'd like to contribute, things that you see happening in the future?
I'm not as technically oriented as you. I'll just put it plain and simple. I'm not much of a gearhead. So in terms of things I see coming in the future, off the top of my head, of course, I think LiDAR might become a bigger thing. I think a digital 3D experience might expand as well. I think we might see integration of AI into cameras in the long future. We might see something. I'm thinking we might see something where I think it was already developed, where you have a box with like multiple lenses that take it at different depths of field, and then from there you have AI basically juice up the algorithm to where you can decide where the blur fall off is, because you have all the data at every depth of field. So I'm thinking that might be more popular as like an all-in-one system.
Might be. Well, you bring up something about you say you're not technical, but everybody can relate to what I'm about to talk to you. And this is something that this is a gripe, maybe a mini rant I have. I have a couple mini rants I'm going to go on today. And it is technology based, but it's also something that non-technological people can identify with. And that is how cumbersome and terrible camera apps are. There's no, like, if there's a the grass is greener conversation, everyone's like, man, my Canon app for my phone sucks. I'll bet you Nikon users have it better. It's like, no, they hate their app too. Sony users hate their app, and Fuji users hate their app. And the thing that I don't understand is camera manufacturers can invest all this money and make these incredible optics that are just mind-blowing and have these cameras that do some amazing things. But for whatever reason, they can't go to Apple or Google or one of these people who make Android phones or whatever and just hire a fucking software developer who can design an app for a phone that doesn't suck. And I don't understand why this is so hard, because software is the future. I mean, as we proved during the pandemic, you can run entire companies remotely from a laptop. So everything is happening over these ones and zeros, over these fiber optic cables and all that. And, everything's digital. That's the future. So why can't they, with the amount of talent that is out there that you could just hire, like Canon could just be like, look, we're going to pay this dude $250,000 a year to just spearhead this operation to get our app to not suck. And I don't understand why it's taking so long for camera manufacturers to figure that out. It's 2023, and you look at all the crazy stuff you can do with a phone. But it's like, oh, well, I have to go into this menu, and I have to go to the sub menu to turn Wi-Fi on or Bluetooth on, and then I gotta go to my phone, and I gotta have it find my camera, and it's like, maybe make it like when you log into Paramount Plus, which is like, here's a code. And then you pull up your phone, and it's like, oh, the camera's saying the code is 4523. Okay, 4523. Boom, they're connected. And then it'll ask you, do you want me to dump JPEG versions of all these shots that you're shooting in RAW to your camera, just so you have backups? And you can, if you don't have a second card or something, you're like, yes, check it, and you're done. That's the way it needs to work. And the user experience is just garbage. And I've always about once a year, I re-download these apps to see if they've been improved, and all I remind myself is why I don't use these apps in the first place. I don't know who's designing them, and I'm on multiple systems, by the way. I use Fuji as well, so I love my Canon cameras, I love my Fuji cameras, but both of them suck. Sony users complain that it sucks. Nikon users complain that it sucks. I don't even know if Panasonic Lumix has an app, but everybody hates their app, and so this is my wish list for the future. We're on this portion of the podcast, which is something that is on my wish list that I want to see moving forward with camera manufacturers.
Yeah, I don't have as much of a gripe with Nikon Snap Bridge. It used to be an absolute nightmare to do, but being that I shoot all my videos on Nikon and it doesn't have the reversible screen, I do connect my Nikon to the Snap Bridge and then switch it to video mode. And I can change everything from there and make sure that I've got, everything lined up just from my phone. And so I don't have to keep getting up, hitting record, sitting back down. It's, the chair might be moved out of the way, things might change. I might accidentally hit the tripod. I can just hit record from my phone. But I mean, for taking photos, it's absolute garbage. But but for the video aspect, I do enjoy the Nikon app.
This is Jason Berkman, and you're listening to the F11 Photography Podcast.
So in stills photography, if I take a picture of you at ISO 100 f8, 1/100th of a second, I can look that up later and see what my settings were. I was surprised to learn that there's no way to do that with video. You can't see what your f-stop was. There's no EXIF data on video. You can't shoot a video. You'll know what, if you right click, it'll say, hey, this was shot at 4K, 30 frames per second, or whatever.
Right.
But in that data, it can't tell you what lens you were using. It can't tell you what your shutter speed was, because maybe you have some weird frame dropouts and you accidentally bumped your shutter speed, when you were out of sync or something. Or you don't know what depth of field you were at. And so that I personally, want to know that because like I do video tests for YouTube. Sometimes I'm testing out a lens and I'm like, shit, what were my settings? Was I at f8 there, f5.6? Because some people want to know the difference. And, I have to like remind myself to write down my settings. And so I thought that was a bit odd that, as advanced as the video industry is, they don't have an EXIF data type thing like stills. Am I right on that? You can't look that up, right?
I think that's more of a third party thing. I know Blackmagic has, like, if you upload into a Blackmagic software, they usually have a capacity to like tell you all those things and the frame rate and that sort of thing. But it's a lot of third party apps that can tell you that kind of stuff. It's not really like native to your laptop or anything like that.
Well, so for instance, like the contacts between your lens and your camera tell you all that data. As to why they can't embed that into video files, I don't know. That's something I would like to see. Just something simple, something that I would like to see the entire industry get on board with. Because if I use a Nikon Z, whatever the fuck numbers you guys use, and I use a Canon, and then I use a Panasonic, and I just go take a bunch of stills with it, and I import all those files into Lightroom, it'll just tell me like with those stills, like, oh yeah, you're at f8, 1/100th of a second, ISO 100. And it doesn't matter what camera brand I use. And so for stills, camera brands and Lightroom all gone on board with each other. I don't see why they couldn't get on board with like Premiere and, using these video codecs and all that. Like, I don't understand why they don't do it. And maybe I'm the weirdo and everybody else in the industry is like, it doesn't matter. We don't care about that kind of stuff. But I like to know as much about what I was shooting as possible to get better at shooting video. And sometimes knowing like my f-stop, I mean, I know obviously if I'm shooting at a super shallow depth of field, I'm like, okay, I know I'm shooting wide open here, but maybe my ISO was a little different or something. Like, why is this noisy? Did I bump my ISO? Like, just, to me, I think that would be cool, but maybe it's not something that the video industry cares about. That
might honestly, thinking about it now, you might have to use something beyond a consumer grade video camera to get that kind of stuff. Like a Blackmagic Pocket Cam, that would probably tell you, because I can't imagine them not having it in the industry.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, I'm not a professional cinematographer or videographer, so I don't know that. It's just I know that like on my Canon cameras, on my Fuji cameras, like anytime I ask somebody who claims to be a videographer, like, oh yeah, you can't do that. I'm like, there's no data out there. I'm like, oh, okay. So I think it would be kind of cool to see. Maybe it's just too much of an undertaking for the industry to do it, but that's just something I would like to see on my wish list. But yeah, that's one thing. My other rant of the day I want to go on. I just talked about how I would love to see the apps get a little better. This one to me makes a shitload of sense, and there's actually a change.org petition to get this done, which is when you go to the Apple Store and you buy a new iPhone or whatever, you go and you buy a new Android phone, or you get one thrown in for free with your cell phone plan. There is one thing that these billions with a B of phones all have in common. It is, one, they all have cameras in them. And two, all of these cameras or phones have tracking devices in them. So if somebody steals your phone and you're an iPhone user, you can go to Find My Phone and you know where your phone is, assuming that it's on. Okay, well, this is something that is getting thrown in for free with my cell phone plan. Now, let's say you go out and you buy a $6,000 camera and someone steals it. Wouldn't you fucking want to know where that thing is? Okay, and so if someone's listening, they're like, well, do you understand how big of an undertaking it would be? Well, let me tap the brakes on that. I owned, in 2012, a Canon 6D. And the Canon 6D inside the hot shoe, under the hot shoe, had a GPS device in it. So anytime I go anywhere in the world and I take a picture and then I would go into Lightroom, Lightroom has an area where you have a map. It'll show me where I took every single picture. And this is an 11-year-old technology. So the ability to track where my pictures are taken has been in Canon cameras for years, and it would just slowly drain your battery. But it wasn't that big of a battery suck. So if it can triangulate satellites to show you where pictures are taken, then it can triangulate satellites to show you where your camera is. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that. And there's no reason why camera manufacturers shouldn't be able to do that and put that in their new cameras. And this is something that you get for free with your phone. Well, you pay for your phone and it comes with your phone. The only component they have to figure out on it is they have to have an account assigned to your camera. So when you purchase a camera, you have to register your camera. I mean, they'll have to force you to register to use that feature. That way, if you sell your camera, then you transfer ownership, and then the camera will then transfer to their account, just like it would with an iPhone. If you sell an iPhone, you take out the SIM card, somebody puts a new SIM card in it, and then their Apple ID then is assigned to that phone.
Yeah, and saying that, it's like this isn't out of the ordinary. If you've ever bought anything DJI, you know that each item from DJI that you buy, whether it be a GoPro, a gimbal, or a drone, they want all of your information. The Chinese want everything, and they want your app on. The app has to be on your phone at all times, and they're connected to it. So it's a big problem if you're not the type of person that enjoys the invasion of privacy. That's already happening, and it's a must for all DJI equipment.
Well, these are the same people who are like, they're coming after me, man. They of course tweets that from their phone, and Twitter's tracking all of their data while they do it. It's like, yeah, I don't think you quite understand how this works. You're already being tracked 24/7, and frankly, if somebody steals a $6,000 camera from me, I want to know where it is. I want to track it down. That's a situation. Yeah, and yes, I have insurance, and it's good to have insurance, but don't you want to know where your stuff is, man? Like, and I don't know anybody who, when their camera gets stolen, is like, boy, sure, I'm glad I don't have a way to figure out where my camera is right now. They're all going to be like, fuck, I wish I had this little tracking device thing. And I don't understand why they do it. So if you're listening and you're like, oh man, this is hopeless. Well, I do have a way to combat it a little bit. And once again, I have to go to Apple for help. And it's not a perfect solution, but I buy AirTags. You can get AirTags for $20. You can cut the lining of your bag out and shove the AirTag in there, stitch it up or whatever, and you'll always have an AirTag in your bag that'll track your bag. Of course, it only tracks where your bag is. So if people steal your camera, and the first thing they do is they take it to a pawn shop and leave the bag, in a trash bin somewhere in a dumpster, then you only know where the bag is. But it is a kind of a Band-Aid method to get you through, but I don't think it's ideal. I think that it can be optional. You can toggle it on, toggle it off, say track my camera. And then that way I should be able to log in, to a web browser like canon.com/track my camera. They're like, cool, what's your Canon ID? Oh, okay. We see that you own a Canon EOS R5. Are you wondering where that is? Yes. Okay, it's here. We triangulated it down to this street corner. And it's like, okay, that's where my camera is. I don't think that is a big ask. I think that it's something that, if camera companies really wanted to do right, they should include standard. And yes, I am putting the onus on them because as they raise the prices of cameras and, lenses and all that, and they get more expensive, that's a more sensitive topic for us if our stuff gets stolen. And, like in the city of San Francisco, camera theft is up like a shitload right now. As a matter of fact, the change.org thing started, I believe, out of San Francisco because of the amount of theft of people. You show up with a Pelican case. A Pelican case is a way of advertising to the world, hey, come rob me, because I have a lot of really expensive stuff in here. But
yeah, I nearly got robbed at Haight-Ashbury last time I was in San Fran during COVID. I went to Haight-Ashbury with a bunch of the homies. I had all my film gear and cameras on me. I look like Dennis Hopper in Apocalypse Now, the way I was walking around there, the street. And there weren't normal people walking around there. It was like vagabonds. Like the whole street was vagabonds, like ponchos, little tents on the corner of the streets. It was vile. And I had several guys, just because I was taking street photos, they were whacked out on whatever they were taking at the time, and they confronted me and my friends and started getting handsy and were like grabbing at my cameras. They're like, you can't fucking take photos of us. Like, this is our fucking street, man. They went full 1969 on me, and we had to get out of there. So that's totally believable.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I hear a lot of street photographers when they shoot in places like San Francisco, they have to get gaffer's tape and put it over their Fuji logo or their Leica logo or whatever, because they don't want people to know what they've got. They just want it to look like a nondescript little camera it's just a little pocket camera. They don't need to know it's a $6,000 Leica or anything like that. But yeah, man, it's crazy. And, I've had to look over my shoulder a little bit when I shoot street. And I, have to double. I really have to think about what camera I want to take with me. But I just think that it's not a big ask. I really do think that these manufacturers could hire somebody from Apple and, hey, we're going to pay somebody who, or even collaborate with them. Like, we're collaborating with Apple, the people who made the AirTags. We're gonna pay Apple $1 million or whatever to just help us develop this technology to put it in our cameras. And then that way, if your camera gets stolen, you can find it. You could even make it to where it's like not tied to your camera's battery, but you could get like some sort of a little slot in your hot shoe that you can just open up, like a little compartment. And then you put those little, I forget what those little cylindrical batteries are that you use for like your scale, and like you can use them for older cameras. I forget what they're called, but one of the little batteries, and then it's always on. So even if somebody removes the battery out of your compartment, the GPS signal is still pinging, and I can, every 5 minutes or so I can update, look, oh, it's on this street corner or whatever. It's on Ashbury, and some dude who mugged me now has my camera.
Yeah, using it to stir like Modelo soup or something like that. Yeah, no, I for one, in the wish list of things, I definitely, and I'm going to beat a dead horse here. Nikon needs to catch up with their autofocusing. They've made a line of mirrorless cameras, and the autofocus is far behind Sony cameras released 5 years ago still. I mean, it's adequate, but if you're in low light situations, the autofocus is terrible. And, don't even think about using third-party lenses. I went and shot at South by Southwest, and I was using my Viltrox 85mm 1.8. Of course, I was shooting wide open because it was late at night. It was around 1:30. And some of the...
You shot wide open?
Oh, yeah.
You usually stop down.
Usually. I shot wide open because using the camera I was using, I just didn't want to push my ISO to 20,000 that night. So shooting 1.8 from a distance, the autofocus was absolutely terrible, and it was, I wanted to deliver. I was getting paid good money for this shoot, and it was this South American record label. They're called Fama Collective, Fama, like brilliant group of artists, all from South America and Mexico. Like absolutely great performance. You should check them out. But I ended up turning autofocus off because I'm just like, I'm missing shots here. And thank goodness the Viltrox has a great focusing ring. And so I was able to hit more shots on manual focus. So, and that's with a Nikon Z6, which isn't their worst camera, not their best, but they've got to up their game. And, the focus hunting, even in broad daylight, trying to capture the eyes and the face with the smallest focus area is an absolute nightmare.
It's funny you mentioned that because, like, as somebody who shoots on both Canon and Fuji, I have the same complaints about Fuji, and I very much have those same complaints about Fuji GFX. So I did a video on my YouTube channel, as a matter of fact, where I said, hey, here's the top 5 things I want to see in a Fuji GFX 100S Mark II, which is not a real camera. It's just a concept at this point. But when you own a camera for a year or two, you start thinking, okay, here's the things that I don't like about it that I hope to see in the next version of it. And one of the things that I wanted to see in the Fuji GFX is I wanted to see way better autofocus. So to your point, when I shoot in the studio on my Fuji GFX, I put it in manual focus. Now, thankfully, when I'm shooting in the studio, I'm shooting at f8 and f11, so I tend to, have my model sit in the pocket of where my focus is. But if I'm doing closer headshots, they can easily move out even at f8. I mean, that's pretty shallow when you're super close. And so it's garbage. I mean, as much as a Fuji GFX camera costs, when it hits, you get a portfolio shot. It's one of the best shots you've ever taken as far as how beautiful it is, as long as you compose it well and all that. From a geek out, look at my technology of my dynamic range and my colors and all that standpoint, yes, when you nail on the GFX, you're just like, oh, yeah, this is why I bought this camera. But getting there, it's like shooting on manual focus film cameras, medium format manual focus film cameras, and the autofocus on it is pretty useless. It's less of an issue with Fuji X, but it is funny. I am in Fuji forums, and they're like, they have the new XH2S and the XH2, which came out. And they are good compared to their predecessors. But listening to the Fuji fanboys be like, oh my God, we're finally catching up with Sony and Canon. I'm like, no, this is about as good as my Canon cameras were in 2018. You guys are not there yet. It is good. For Fuji, this is a big step in the right direction. But I mean, if you look at the latest versions of, the R3 has eye autofocus. I can just look at you and it'll it'll like read my eye and go, oh, I'm going to focus on you. And then I move my eye to the left and it'll focus. Like, I don't even have to like back button focus. I just look at things and the camera focuses on it by reading my eye. So to say that Fuji is caught up with Canon and Sony is like absolutely ridiculous to even consider that.
You are listening to the F11 Photography Podcast.
Another gripe I have is, years ago, Sony released the A7S3, and that's probably one of the most groundbreaking, influential cameras that we've ever seen at a consumer prosumer grade. And why? Because it can record in-camera log, S-Log 1, 2, and 3 at extremely high quality with amazing autofocus and an insane ISO range. And here we are with Nikon. They released their new lineup of cameras, and all the way up to the Z7 II, just before the Z9, there's no in-camera log possibility. You can't record N-Log without using an external recorder. And not only that, but there was only one singular proprietary system to record N-Log with Nikon, and that's the Ninja Atomos 5, which is another $500 to record log. And not only that, is if you look at any comparison, side-by-side comparison between N-Log on a Nikon Z7 II and the Sony A7S III, the amount of noise that you capture in log with those cameras and that recorder is astonishingly higher than with an A7S III, and you can't even record past 60 FPS at 4K, because beyond that, at 120 or any other slow mo, the Ninja burns in all the icons on the screen, so your footage will have the f-stop indicator, your histogram, and everything. So if they're trying to boast a hybrid camera in an age where content is straddling the line between both photo and video for creators and photographers alike, it's a massive problem.
Yeah, that can get a little crazy. I have the Atomos Ninja 5. It's a really, really cool device, and I thankfully Canon got that stuff figured out. I can just record straight video, and I don't have to burn in my f8 and my histogram and all that. But that's got to be super frustrating. Another thing that bugs me that I hope manufacturers implement, and this is something, and I'm not bragging on Canon because I'll call them out when I don't like things, but something that Canon has done that I want to see every manufacturer do, and I think Nikon may have a variation of this. You can verify because you're a Nikon user. I have a Canon R5, I have a Canon R7, and I used to own a EOS R. All the Canon R series bodies that are over $1,000. When you turn the camera off, it has a window that goes down over the sensor. So if you're out in the middle of the fucking Saharan desert and you want to change lenses, your sensor is not getting exposed to sand. And then you put the new lens on, and then you turn the power on, and then about a second after there's a latency, a second delay, you hear the window open back up. And then your sensor's exposed. And how good is this technology from Canon? I've owned my EOS R for 2 years this month, and I've cleaned the sensor 0 times, not once. And when I do a test to see if there's anything on my sensor, I see nothing. It works perfectly. And, on my Fuji X mount, which is a crop sensor, it doesn't do that, which I guess is less of an issue because it's a smaller sensor. But holy shit, with my GFX, like my GFX sensor is like huge. Like I can fit like 4 fingers into the sensor. That's how big that opening is. And they don't have anything that goes down over the sensor to protect it. And I actually have a picture of my saliva with COVID on it when I was on vacation. Actually, it was I think it was a bead of sweat. Maybe it came out of my mouth. Anyway, either way, I was at the Grand Canyon and I was changing lenses on my GFX, and I don't remember if it was a bead of sweat or just a piece of like spit coming out of my mouth, just went boom right on the sensor. And so I have all these pictures of the Grand Canyon. I didn't bring a cleaning kit with me because I forgot it. And I'm out here in the middle of the Grand Canyon. All my pictures of the Grand Canyon just have like this bead of COVID on it that I have to like Photoshop out. I finally got a sensor when I got home from vacation, but I stopped using my GFX because like I don't feel like Photoshopping all this shit. And we went to White Sands and there's like all these beautiful ripples in the sand and there's just this big fucking dot on it that I had to like
Dude,
clone stamp.
That happens so often to me when I stop down to like F11 or just past F5.6. I start seeing little like squiggly dust lines in my sensor, and I'm like, this sensor was exposed for less than a second and a half, and it's the most frustrating thing because when you're in a studio and you've got a white backdrop, you see, you're spending way too much time, compounding each photo, just taking squiggles out with the stamp tool. And if it's a dynamic background where you like part of that squiggle is in light and the part of it's in the shadow, it makes you want to put your fist through the laptop, through the screen.
Yeah, just another reason to shoot at 1.2. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no kidding.
You don't have to worry about it. And then, shoot 85. And of course, the wider the lens, and the more it shows up. So that's not fun. That's something we'd like to see is the window that goes over the sensors from all manufacturers. Maybe I don't know, maybe Canon patented it, but doesn't Nikon have some sort of a feature that does that? Not in your camera.
You know what? I can't remember. I just watched a Fronose photo where he compared the Sony A1, the Nikon Z9, and what's the big one, the big Canon one? Was it like an R6?
Their flagship?
Their flagship.
R3.
The R3. Yeah, he compared all those, and that's what he liked about Canon was that shutter cover. But Nikon doesn't have it.
Yeah, so my R7. So the R3 is a $6,500 camera. So you'd expect some crazy technology like that, right?
Right. The
R7 is their flagship crop sensor. It's $1,500. It has that. The R8 is $1,500. It has that. I don't think the R10 has it, which it's $999. So you have to be over $1,000. But all professional cameras are over $1,000. So basically, any professional camera Canon makes is going to have that built in. And I don't see why other companies don't do it. Maybe it's a trademark thing. I don't know. Maybe or a patent. I don't know. Maybe Canon has a patent on that window technology. But I'm sure that Nikon or whoever can make a different version of it. So I'd like to see that in all manufacturers, not just for selfish reasons. I want to see my friends be able to enjoy that feature that I have with my Canon as well, my friends who don't shoot on Canon. So I'd love to see the industry go in that direction. Another thing I would like to see is I like to see the whole megapixel thing go away. Everyone's like, oh, we're increasing the megapixels. I own a 100 megapixel camera and it's great and I love it. I crop a lot. I shoot a lot of commercial stuff. But the one thing that I would like to see invested in way more than megapixels is dynamic range, because cameras don't see like our eyes see. So if I take a dark-skinned subject, and put them in the shade, and I look behind their shoulder and I see like a skyline that's 2 p.m. super bright, my eyes have the ability to see all the highlight detail in that sky and the sky behind them. But then I can look at the dark-skinned subject in front of me in the shade and still see details in their body. And if I take a camera and I try to take a picture of that, my camera is going to go, okay, you have to pick one or the other. Do you want to see this very well illuminated subject and then just bright white? Or do you want to see these highlights preserved, but then you just see eyes and teeth? And that's a problem. And the only way you can combat that is with flash. The only way you can do dynamic compression is with flash. I want to take two things and I want to get them closer to each other. And, with my Fuji GFX, I have seen some innovations that allow me to, combat that. But that's a very expensive camera. And so I want to see camera manufacturers make a really big effort into increasing the dynamic range of their cameras because, people, there are phones that have marketing campaigns where they have like a person of color on there who's like, I like this phone because the camera in there gets my skin tones accurate. And a lot of you can't get skin tones accurate if you can't even expose the stuff properly. If you underexpose a subject, your options are super limited as far as pulling color out. It's like I was talking about in in one of the episodes we did where I was talking about my Fuji GFX. My Fuji GFX, it'll see darker colors in shade, but it'll also pull the colors out of the shade, whereas a Nikon or a Canon will go, that's just black. That area is just black. It's like, no. There's a color that is being shaded, and we need to pull that color out. And that's where I want to see camera manufacturers invest. Because I think outside of Fuji and Nikon, who we've complained about their autofocusing, once their autofocus gets dialed in, dynamic range is the next spot. That's where we need to focus, in my opinion, as an industry, and when we're talking about technology, is dynamic range.
I don't think I've ever found limitation in that. I think that's a very specific situation. While I do think we should absolutely prioritize dynamic range over megapixels, especially like that's such a boasting point. Like the new Sony A9 is like, yeah, you get 120 megabytes in each shot. It's just like, why would I need that? Like I need the range more than that, because the vast majority of people, like the cost to shoot that quality and that like size of file, it compounds. You're buying more lacies, you're slowing your gear down, your laptop down. You need better processors and you need better storage. You have to invest in SD cards and that sort of stuff. So it's like, it just doesn't make sense. Plus nobody's shooting billboards. Like, let's be real. And even if they are, they can accomplish a billboard with a 24 megapixel camera, easily.
Yeah, because viewing distance is what matters there. If you viewed billboards at 6 inches, then yes, you would need more than a 24 megapixel camera. But you're viewing billboards from several hundred feet away, and so you can pull it off. I mean, magazine covers 8 megapixels is all you need. And so the only reason why I use high megapixel cameras is with commercial jobs. A lot of times you're asked to crop things a lot and in different ways. I've had brides ask me to crop like 90% of a picture out before. And so I like them for that reason. I do like the high megapixels, but I found the point where it's like I don't need any more for sure. And really 45, 50 megapixels is like the highest I've actually ever needed. I didn't get the Fuji GFX necessarily for the megapixels as much as I did for the color science and the dynamic range, because the dynamic range is insane, but it is a luxury medium format camera that most people aren't going to buy. So I'd like to see that technology trickle down into full frame and crop sensor, because I think that everybody deserves it.
Hi, I'm Jordan Groby, and you're listening to the F11 Photography Podcast.
I've got one more thing that I'd like to see, and this is more in the software side, is I'd love for Adobe to include a monitor calibration software within their photography bundle. I think that a lot of people shoot on different systems. I know Apple has a pretty good sRGB display, but no same display is the same. I remember I used to edit on an HP laptop, and in order for me to calibrate it, I couldn't get it to a place where I liked, especially when it's going to mostly be displaying on phones for Instagram, as well as a lot of Mac stuff. And so I had my profile in my Photoshop. Everything was like dialed in sRGB. The color science was Adobe 1998, which is the widest palette back then. And then I had a viewing in sRGB, and I was like, okay, everything's looking good. And then when I'd see it on my phone, it would, like, the yellows would be orange, like it was just a blown out picture. And so I had to incorporate a process of literally butchering my image through my laptop's monitor, just so I could see it correctly on a more balanced screen. And I don't know if a lot of people notice that sort of thing, but it was definitely something that it's just tears and toil, and it'd be so much easier if there was sort of like a universal software that Adobe could put out to sort of streamline that process. Yeah,
so I've run into that same problem that you've run into, and what I'm going to say is probably a bit controversial, because the majority of our listeners who are avid photographers are probably Lightroom users. But the single best thing I ever did to calibrate my colors for Lightroom was that I left Lightroom and I started using Capture One. And I found that it was just easier to work with the color space in there. This is just my personal experience. I bought a new iMac, and I was using Lightroom, and I had years of Lightroom edits and all that. And for whatever reason, my external hard drives, after a few days on my new on my new iMac, just disappeared. I could not find my external hard drives that had all my sessions on them. I'm like, I go, I'm on YouTube looking up, like, why are my hard drives not showing up? And so I went through and tried to figure out every way to get my hard drive to show up. Again, I updated things, I updated the software, I updated my Mac, etc. Went through all the processes. I could not get my hard drives to show up. I was buried about 8 projects deep at that point. And I was like, I have to do something. And a lot of really successful professionals who are way more successful than I am that I've talked with over the years, like, oh, well, you just use Capture One. And I downloaded the trial, I checked it out, and I was like, by the time I got out of those 8 projects, I was like, okay, I'm a Capture One user now. And it was almost like there was a cloud that got lifted over my files. When it came to color editing, I could see color better. The color space made more sense. And that's just me, it's just what works for me. I'm not an endorsee or anything. I don't endorse Capture One. They don't pay me. I spend my money every month on the program because it helps me make money as a working professional. And that is the episode today. Don't forget to check out our 10% off link for Luminar Neo, which is a really cool AI software. You can check us out at f11pod.com. You can check us out at F11pod on Instagram, on Twitter, on YouTube, etc. I thank each and every one of you for checking out today's episode. Check out our YouTube channels as well. Brandon Gorrie has one and I have one. Kevin Deal also going to be in the link in the description of this podcast. But yes, until next time, chase light, not algorithms.
Thank you for listening to today's episode.
For more information about this podcast, go to www.f11pod.com.